Here we are back on Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Let's look at the price of diesel. It just went higher today. As I'm recording this, it went lower yesterday. It was higher before that, and it was a lot lower than that for a few days before that. Wait, I almost forgot to tell you that we call the show Drilling Deep because we talk about oil, we talk about diesel, like we just did, and you need to drill to get oil, and you need oil to make diesel. We also have a guest every week. This week, it's Max Farrell, the CEO and founder of WorkHound. Max is going to talk about a recent NLRB rule, National Labor Relations rule, that he thinks could impact the pace of unionization, not just in trucking, but in all sorts of fields. Let's have some perspective on the price. Yes, the price has been crazy, and the price of diesel is high. The latest DOE-EIA diesel price that came out last Monday actually was down more than 9 cents. It came in at $4.49.8 a gallon. You know what it was a year ago? The corresponding week for 2022 was $5.22.4 per gallon. So we're higher than we were just a few months ago, but we're also about 70 cents less than where we were a year ago. I thought this week was a good time to remind everybody that U.S. diesel markets are not just a U.S. phenomenon. They are part of the global market, and quite frankly, given that you can put diesel on a ship and send it anywhere around the world where the best price is, the market doesn't particularly care about your international borders. That's why the latest monthly report of the International Energy Agency is so timely. The report has a standard amount of data, a huge amount of data actually, on supply and demand, but it also will focus on one or two specific features of the market each month and write a piece on it. This month, they looked at the European diesel market. This is not like Vegas. It's not like what happens in Europe stays in Europe. What happens in Europe or Asia or wherever can and does impact the rest of the diesel market, including the U.S. So what the IEA wrote this month wasn't shocking, but does clarify that even though diesel is off its high levels, even with the bullish reaction these past few days from the attacks on Israel, there's still a lot of tightness out there. The EIA noted that refiners in Europe right now are making tons of money. Actually, they're making money everywhere in the world. But despite that, European crude throughputs, which is the amount of crude they put through their refineries, that number is well below historical averages. Some of it is because refineries have closed. But the numbers are that runs are down about 1.3 million barrels per day in Europe compared to before the pandemic, and refinery shutdowns are maybe half of that. One reason the market for jet fuel is even stronger than the market for diesel. Both are middle distillates, so they compete with each other when refiners figure out what they want to do with their distillate molecules. Do they make diesel, or do they make jet fuel, or heating oil, or some other minor distillate products? So that benefits jet consumers. The IEA also notes that the loss of output from Russia, which has been a major supplier of diesel to Europe, has definitely been a factor. Put this all together, and as the EIA says, fourth quarter diesel balances look tight. It lays out one scenario where inventories could end the fourth quarter, so at the end of December, at a level seen only once in the last 20 years. And that time was not at the start of the winter the way a tight inventory balance at the end of the fourth quarter would be. You need more stocks at the start of winter because distillates are used for heating. At this late point, getting ready for the season, the IEA said there are, quote, limited options, close quote, for European refiners to build their low inventory levels. It would take a rebound in refinery yields, meaning they'd have to make more diesel and less jet and other things, run more crude through the refineries, or import a lot more, or maybe do all three. And then comes the kicker, something nobody has any control over. Quote, markets may have to rely on another mild winter to avoid even tighter diesel market conditions through the first quarter of 2024, close quote, the EIA said. Can we have a second mild winter? Even if you're a snow lover, your wallet may require it. Time to move on here now on Drilling Deep. We've got an old friend today here. He's Max Farrell. He's the CEO of WorkHound, which is mostly known for its app-based driver feedback tool. But given that relations between employer and employee are a major part of what WorkHound does, he also keeps a close eye on labor law and labor relations in general. What has caught his eye recently is a proposal by the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, that he believes is going to make unionization easier, or certainly it'll make it more interesting. So Max is here to talk to us today. Max, welcome back to Drilling Deep.
John, always good to chat with you, sir.
So I do want to give you a chance to describe WorkHound, what it does, what its day job is, before we get into discussion about the NLRB.
For sure.
What does it do?
Yeah, so WorkHound is a real-time anonymous feedback platform for frontline workers. So we got our start in the trucking industry where turnover's high and companies were trying to figure out why are people leaving and what can we do to improve our company so we retain more people and build a better business. And what we've seen over the years is that more companies in the supply chain and just broader frontline workforces are saying, hey, we want to get a pulse on our people. Sometimes it's not necessarily just to improve retention. Sometimes it's just to say, how do we improve our blind spots? How do we maintain a direct working relationship with our people and use people data alongside machine data or financial data to make business decisions? And so as WorkHound has evolved over the years, we've really invested heavily in operational intelligence. So companies are able to see how is one location performing to another, where are the heartburn issues inside a business, and then give them the tools to do something about it and communicate so they do build a better workplace.
All right. So now, as a result of that, you really, I'm sure, keep a very close eye on labor law, labor regulations, et cetera. When I got the note from you that the NLRB proposed rules are kind of a big deal, I thought, well, I hadn't never heard from you on that issue. But then I thought, of course, that makes a lot of sense that Max has to keep his eye there. What is the NLRB proposal?
Yeah. So, first off, our goal is to give a voice to workers. And the majority of companies out there are non-union and prefer a direct labor relationship, but we work with both organizations that have a union presence and don't. At the end of the day, our goal is to understand what does it take to give workers a voice so companies are making the best decisions possible to build a great business. In regards to the NLRB, there's a ruling that came out where starting in late December of this year, the timeline for union elections will significantly reduce. And so in the past, a union would, if people inside an organization would say, hey, we want to bring a union in here, they would have to go petition to do a vote. There would be essentially a debate on both sides for both the company to avoid the union and for the union to be in place, and then a vote would happen. Whereas now the new rule makes it a lot easier. So if there's interest in a union inside an organization or a division of one, the people or the union can say, hey, we have enough votes to certify this union. And then it's the onus is on the company to say, whoa, we actually want to do a vote. So, the company can't just do nothing and wait and have a union vote or certification drag out over months or years. Now it can happen much quicker as a result of this update from the NLRB.
Now, is this rule in place or is this a proposed rule?
As far as I know, this is happening on December 26th, that this change is happening.
It's interesting you say that because I wrote the story recently about the unit at ECM, which is owned by Warner, a small New Jersey division that decided to unionize with the commercial and food workers, not the Teamsters. And I seem to recall that the timeline on them was pretty tight. It sounds to me like this rule would make tight timelines become the standard. I mean, when I looked at the timeline of what I'd heard it went on at ECM, I was thinking that is really quick.
Yeah, it's I think even then there was for any sort of event like that, there is time for the company to go and send their leadership to have a conversation with the people there. But the challenge is that the wheels are already in motion, and so it's tough. But yeah, it'll be a lot easier for unions going forward to be able to say, hey, we've got the votes. Do you want to challenge this? And all of a sudden, a company that was flat-footed and not even expecting it is playing from behind to make
in that case. Warner CEO Derek Leathers actually went to New Jersey to lobby for a no vote, and he was apparently a little bit successful because the vote, I think, was something like 11-8. That kind of shows you how small the unit was, but it was important enough in the management halls of Warner Enterprises that the CEO visited New Jersey. I thought that was highly significant.
Well, certainly, because the once you have one division inside an organization, as a company, you have to develop an associate relation strategy. And so there are other larger carriers out there that do have leaders with an associate relations role that do have some union presence, maybe in a metro area like Chicago, that where they just that has to be a part of their business strategy, and that's their reality. And so, it's certainly understandable why a CEO would want to go to a location to make their case, because now that will be a part of their business strategy going forward.
There's been so much talk about a revival of unionization. But quite frankly, when I've seen numbers on the percent of the size of the workforce that's unionized, it doesn't seem to be rising much at all. And if it is rising, it tends to be in the public sector, not the private sector. In some ways, this is, but then on the other hand, you've got certainly more strike action. The number of days lost to strikes in 2023 is going to be the highest in a long time. Got some very prominent ones, the UAW, the Mack truck strike that just started this week. A non-truck stuff, you've got the big one in Kaiser Permanente out in California in the healthcare field. What is your view on the revival of unionization? Is it real or is it hype?
Well, I think the core thing is that there is a rise in how do workers have a voice inside the workplace? Because what winds up happening is that in moments like this, if workers don't feel heard or valued, they have two choices. They can either fight or leave. And if the work is plentiful out there, then leaving's the easy answer. Turnover's high in a lot of industries where that tends to be the case. It's easier to just walk away and go find a job elsewhere. But when you do have people inside companies that maybe they like the organization, or they like the work, or the work is niche enough, then they're going to fight. And that's where companies have to be prepared to say, what are we doing so that it doesn't get to the boiling point where they feel like they have to fight or leave? So I would say across the country, yes, labor support is high because it's power to the people. That's an easy thing to get behind. But to your point, as far as the data, the number of unions, the percentage of union employment hasn't gone up significantly. And part of that's that it's tricky to do. 27 states have right to work where you can't force union dues. And so any sort of union activity in the majority of states is going to be piecemeal, because let's say a location in Chattanooga, Tennessee says, hey, we want to set up a union here. Well, 100% of those people don't have to join. So already it waters down the impact and effectiveness of that group. So it's tricky because of the piecemeal work across the board.
The unionization move that really struck me the hardest recently was at XPO in Hialeah, outside of Miami, where XPO signed its first union contract, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, with a unit in Hialeah. And then then the workers, like a year and a half later, voted to decertify. I mean, this was just a stunning turnaround that fast. I mean, XPO had resisted signing the contract. They finally did. And here suddenly the workers throw out the union. I don't know if you're familiar with this at all, but when you see something like that, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's that you can always make a new decision. And so if people are inside the workplace and they're not seeing substantial change, or there's promises that were made and maybe the grass wasn't greener on the other side, people can always make a new decision. But what I can imagine is that in any environment like that, you have the company still nudging, saying, hey, look at the things we're doing with this direct relationship we have across our other organizations. I know that there are some companies that their strategy is, if one of our locations becomes unionized, like we're just going to freeze growth there and either like move our growth opportunities to other locations. So it really is a catch-22 that businesses may have some internal strategy where they say, we may wind up winding down some of these locations if it becomes unionized, because it's harder for us to run our business playbook. And so I don't know how much that had to factor in, but that's certainly a consideration when a chapter of a company makes that move either for or against embedding a union.
Now you get a lot of worker feedback. That's what you do. So if
Yep.
you were sitting down with some CEOs and other management types who were trying to fend off a union, maybe not necessarily fend it off like there's a battle right now, but where they've already made a decision, look out over the next several years, we might get a unionization push. What's the best way to combat that? And not even combat it, but just to deter it from the beginning. What was some of the pieces of advice you would give? I mean, they've got lawyers to tell them the legal things to do.
Right.
In terms of an employee relations thing to do, what would you tell?
Yeah, well, at that point, the workers inside that company have said, we don't feel heard, we don't feel valued, and again, it's fight or leave. And so they've said, we're going to fight, and this is the way that we're putting our stake in the ground to make a difference. So the best tool that a company has if they're wanting to have a direct relationship with their workforce is to get ahead of issues and make it where people feel valued and respected and heard, so that they're able to get ahead of things. So, for example, I think where a lot of this starts to happen is when one company acquires another, and they go through spreadsheet data. They look at the performance data of a business. Maybe they do a walkthrough of a location, but they don't get raw insight of what are people thinking and feeling inside the culture of this group. And so then they get surprised when the leadership of the company that's being acquired says, hey, everything's great here. People love it here. Family environment. Well, maybe that's not all what it's cracked up to be. So getting an idea ahead of time to say, okay, what's really going on in this location? There's one company that comes to mind that we partner with. They actually started to see a decrease in sentiment in one of their Florida locations, and they looked at the data and brought their leadership up from Florida to their headquarters. And what they saw was, all right, there's a misalignment between what we're hearing from our leadership about what's happening in that organization and what we're hearing from the front lines. So they coached up the leaders. They developed a strategy to say, how do we get back to a better place with our people? One, because it's the right thing to do inside a business. But two, it does maintain that direct relationship inside the organization.
Yeah, you mean what you mentioned about the acquisition. ECM was acquired by Werner about 2 years ago, and then this small unit decides to unionize. So that's very much in keeping with what you're saying.
Certainly, yeah. It's across any organization. It's you have to get ahead of this, and you can't. I think the misstep that a number of leaders make is they look around the board table and say, we're doing enough, right? And they all nod their head and move on to something else. But you really kind of got to approach it with a chip on your shoulder right now to just say, what else can we be doing more of? Because especially in a business like trucking or anywhere in the supply chain, that workforce is your revenue generator. And so it's in your best interest to say, all right, how do we make sure we take care of these people so that one, we're making money, but two, we're able to just focus on our zone of genius instead of having extra variables put in place like union votes or something like that.
Yeah, I'm guessing pay is always an issue, but you just can't stay in business today if you're not paying your people a market rate or competitive with what else is out there as options. So maybe I'm being naive here to think that will kind of take care of the pay issue. So I'd imagine that a lot of the feedback that you get that might also end up being a force for ultimate unionization has nothing to do with pay and has everything to do with all sorts of other stuff.
Well, pay is certainly mentioned, but folks often think pay is an amount issue. And yes, we all want more money, but often the issues with pay are people not understanding their pay or feeling like it's incorrect. And those are where the frustrations exist. And so once that happens, then somebody feels like, the company's cheating them. And really the thing that I'm seeing companies do based on the pay data is say, how do we make our pay more predictable and easier to understand? Because in an industry like trucking, they have the most complicated pay structure in all of North America out of industry out there. So, instead of just saying, let's mask it with more money and make the pay structure more complicated, just make it simple, easy to understand and predictable, and good things will happen.
What were some of the things that you would recommend to make it simpler? I mean, I hear that a lot, that trucking pay is really complicated. And somebody can look at their check, of course, not a check anymore, but, their statement and really have no idea how it got there. So what would be some of your key recommendations?
Yeah, so one of the things that continues to grow in popularity right now is some level of guaranteed pay. To say, if you show up to work and do these things, then we're going to take care of you, and anything else is a bonus. Because what's most frustrating about the role of a truck driver, if they're paid cents per mile, is that the entire burden of the supply chain is on their shoulders, and they really can't do anything about it. So, if they're stuck in traffic, or there's construction or bad weather, or a shipper takes forever, that affects their payday. And so if they're able to know, I'm going to be taken care of, at least to know I'm going to meet my family's minimum needs, that provides some psychological safety there. As far as other items, it's just some people are actually shifting over to different pay methods. So instead of cents per mile, sometimes it's hourly, and maybe it's incentivizing movement, where it's like if you're sitting, you make X an hour. If you're moving, you make Y an hour. So companies are certainly trying to get creative in figuring out, how do we take care of our people, but also know that we're running a business.
Are you seeing that a lot? I mean, this has always been talked about as a way to go, and supposedly there's a trend toward it. I mean, are you hearing just sporadic instances of it, or is there really a measurable move away from just compensation on driving per mile?
Yeah, it's still on the fringes, but especially when trucking is cyclical. Right now is a down moment in the cycle. The cycle will come back, and I imagine those conversations will spark again once the cycle is back in full boom mode.
Right. So are there companies out there that, I won't ask you to mention them by name.
Yeah.
If you heard that there was a unionization drive at company X, based on your feedback, you would think to yourself, yeah, I can get that. I get that, because I've seen the feedback in that company, and it's all not uniformly negative, but overwhelmingly negative. And it's not surprising that there be a unionization drive there, given that.
It certainly, you can comb through and make sense of it, that there was just misalignment. I'd say if companies have a mechanism to capture feedback, usually they're ahead of that, and that doesn't become an issue, assuming they're rolling up their sleeves and doing something with the data. Now, there are some companies out there that they have leadership that buries their head in the sand and treats feedback as an insult instead of a gift. So those, you may still have that, even if the feedback's coming to them. But certainly, you'll get a heads up on, why is a satisfaction score in this location happening, or we're getting a lot of equipment complaints or facility complaints in this location. What are we doing to address this? Because at the core, people just want to be respected, feel like they have a voice and be listened to, and see the change happen from that stuff. We can't change everything, but even if a company just acknowledges, hey, we hear you and here's what we're looking into, that can be really worthwhile.
Let's go back to the original question, this NLRB plan that will kick in, sounds like, at the end of the year. Do you think it'll be a significant boost to unionization in the logistics industry, or unionization in general?
I don't know. If I had my crystal ball, I think it will force more conversations than it has historically. And especially in an environment where it becomes easier, then it'll give people the opportunity to try. It won't be as hard to go try to put it inside one segment of a workplace versus another. Whereas now you have to be really intentional to make a push. In the future, it'll be a lot easier to just try. So, I could see it where you do start to see more union votes, whether they are successful or not. That's unknown. But I do think that'll be something that companies are going to have to be conscious of now, that needs to be part of their strategy. What are we doing to connect with our workforce so that we are taking care of people, giving them a voice in a way that they're content and good with where things are.
Max, we want to thank you for joining us today on Drilling Deep. Max Farrell, the CEO of WorkHound.
Hey, thanks so much, John. Appreciate it.
I'm sure we'll have you back. So you have been watching Drilling Deep. We are part of the Freightcast family of podcasts from FreightWaves. You can find us on all the leading platforms. If you see our smiling faces right now, that means you're watching it on YouTube, but you can also find us elsewhere. I've been your host, John Kingston, and please join us again.